Okay, today we're going to focus on writing equations of quadratics in standard form, but before we do that, we're going to review how to take a graph and write the equation in vertex form and then also in standard form. So you want to start with vertex form if you have a picture of the graph, because you can hopefully see the vertex right from the picture. For the graph I have here, it looks like it's -4, -8. And if you guys remember vertex form, y equals a times x minus h squared plus k, where hk is your vertex and a is going to affect the pattern of the graph. Now, you might be able to tell the a value from the graph. If not, if you can't see the pattern, what I would tell you to do is pick any point that goes right through a corner, like any nice point here that's going right through a corner. I'm just going to grab one of the 2 points I just highlighted here. Let's do the -3, -6. Now, if you notice the pattern, you can skip this step and just substitute the h and k, which is our -4, -8 in for the vertex, and the a value that you notice. If you can't tell the pattern, we're going to sub in the point for x and y and the vertex for h and k, and I'll solve for a. So in for y here, I'm going to put -6, and then a will be the only variable here once we start substituting these in. In for x, I'm going to put the x coordinate of the point. And then in for h, now this is going to be minus a negative, so it's going to look like +4. H is the x coordinate of the vertex, k is the y coordinate of the vertex, so make sure you're plugging those in correctly. Now, I'm just going to real quick add 8 to the other side here. And -3 plus 4 is actually just 1. And if we square 1, we're literally just going to end up with 1 times a is equal to 2, so the a value is 2. Now, maybe you came over to the graph and noticed before I did any of that work, you're going over 1 up 2, over 1 up 6, over 1 up 10 wouldn't be real visible on the graph, but maybe you noticed the first 2 iterations of the pattern. So maybe you skipped that step and went right for y equals 2 times x plus 4 squared minus 8. That's your vertex form. Okay, now just to review, to do standard form, all we're going to do is actually take our vertex form and multiply that out. So what that means, you're going to take the x plus 4 and you're squaring it, so that means you're multiplying it by itself. Now, what I would recommend there, just do a FOIL or a box if you prefer that on those parentheses. So I'm just going to end up here, x squared, I'd get plus 4x plus another 4x plus 16. Now the 2 is only being multiplied by the FOIL or box, whatever you do, of that. So this -8, this is not involved in that. That's outside of that. So in terms of writing my standard form, I'm going to combine like terms here real quick on the inside of those parentheses, but you only want to distribute the 2 to your x plus 4 squared, which is what I have in the parentheses here. So this would be 2x squared plus 16x plus 32 minus 8. Now that the parentheses are all gone, now I can actually use that -8. 32 minus 8 is 24. And this would be my equation in standard form. And you don't need to do any factoring or anything like that. Standard form is when you're all multiplied out. Okay, now the rest of what we're going to focus on today is how to write the equation of a quadratic in standard form if we are given 3 points. So the first thing you're probably asking yourself is, why would I need 3 points when we just found the quadratic equation with 2 points, or with a graph? Like, why do I need 3? Okay, so I'm going to try and explain that here. When and why would I need that? So when you have no graph, so you have no picture of the graph, you don't know what it looks like, and if you don't know the vertex, You have to know the vertex to be able to use that vertex form. So if I don't have a picture and I'm not given the vertex, you are going to need 3 points. Now, the reason you're going to need 3 points, if we're trying to write standard form is the y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. What you would not know in that equation would be a, b, and c. Now, we would have 3 unknowns then, a, b, and c. X and y would be variables in our actual equation when we figured it out. But if you have 3 unknowns, you need 3 equations to solve. And so this is going to be a little bit of a throwback to our 3x3 systems, and I'm going to explain that in our first example down here. Okay, so my example, since I don't know a vertex and I don't know a picture for this graph, I can't see what's going on or how these are connected, we need 3 points. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this ax squared plus bx plus c. What we're going to do is create a system for ourselves so that we could solve for these 3 variables a, b, and c. So I'm going to do 3 different equations, and what we're going to need to do in each situation is plug the coordinates of the points in for x and y. So I'm going to repeat this process 3 times. So I'll start with the point 1, negative 2. So what I would do, I'm just going to sub it into this equation here. The negative 2 would go in place of the y, and everywhere I see an x, I would replace it with 1. And then of course I would want to simplify this. 1 squared is just 1, so that first term will just be a. B times 1 is just going to be b, and then c is not being multiplied by anything. Okay, so that would be my first equation. Then I need to select the next point, which is negative 1, negative 8. And if we sub that in, I'm going to put the negative 8 in place of the y here. And then this would be a times negative 1 squared, b times negative 1 plus c. So simplified, negative 1 squared is going to stay 1. This will be a. Now, b times negative 1 will turn this term into a minus b and then plus c. So all simplified. And then one more. We have 3, negative 4. So again, one more time, negative 4, this time's going in for y. And 3 is going in for x. So just to simplify it a little bit, if I square 3, this first term will become 9 times a. The second term will be 3 times b, and the third term will just be c. The third term is always just going to be a c because you're not plugging anything in. Now, if I were to give you this problem earlier on, if we were doing a 3x3 system, I probably would have written something like this, where the numbers here are on the right. So that's just the second equation, and then the third equation. And then we would solve the 3x3 system, which we did by hand earlier on. So not right now are we going to do this. I'm just going to ask you to be able to set these equations up, but I'm actually going to show you on the back how to use your graphing calculator to do this work for you. But this is a way you could do it by hand if you didn't have a graphing calculator. Set up a system of equations and then solve the system of equations for each of the variables a, b, and c. So if you don't have a graphing calculator, we'll do this by hand. Okay, now the rest of what we're going to focus on is how to use the calculator to do that whole 3x3 system for us. So we're going to use something that's called quadratic regression. I'm going to go through on the video here how to get to that. But a quadratic regression is just a quadratic model that best fits the data. So in the case we're working with, we're just going to have 3 points, and we'll work further with this with some data sets for quadratic models for some situations. But for today, we're just going to focus on it with 3 points. So this is the part where you want to grab your calculator. All right. Now I'm going to grab my graphing calculator here. Now the directions on this would be the same if you have an 83 or if you have an 84. The 84 just shows up a little bit better on my video, so that's what I'm going to go with. Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 points. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to want to locate this button here, and it says stat, and it should be in the same spot for everybody. Just going to hit the stat button here. Okay, when I hit the stat button, it pulls up this menu, and in this screen, we're just going to go ahead and hit enter for the edit menu. So let me jot this down. We're doing stat, and then on the edit screen, you're just going to hit enter. That will take you to a screen that looks like this. L1 stands for list 1, and what you want to do is type your X values for the points in there, and L2 is used for list 2, and that's where we're going to type the Y values. The calculator's defaulted to use list 1 for X and list 2 for Y, and we can change these, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So what I'm going to do, each of the X coordinates here, I'm just going to type them. So I'm going to type the number 1, and then I'm just going to hit enter in between each of these. So type the number 1, type -1, hit enter, type -8, hit enter. Okay, now all I'm going to do, hit my arrow key here just to arrow over so I'm in list 2, and I'm going to write down the matching Y coordinate. So the 1 goes with -2, hit enter, the -1 goes with -8, and I just realized I put the wrong X value here, so I'm just arrowing back over real quick. Sorry, that third point was 3. And then -4 goes in for the Y value. You can arrow back and forth in between those. Okay, once you've got that, we're going to hit that stat button again. And then here you want to arrow over to the calc menu. It stands for calculate. And then what you want here is number 5, which is going to say quadreg, which stands for the definition we wrote at the top, quadratic regression. And then from here, you're going to hit enter. Now, different calculators are different, so if you have an 84, it probably will look like this. If you have an 83, it might not pull this screen up. From here, all you want to do is just keep hitting enter until something shows up, and this is what it should look like. So just keep hitting enter. Once you're on that quadreg, just enter as many times as you need to. Okay, and then what we have here are our actual A, B, and C values. So if we're in standard form, here's what this means. I'm going to write just a general standard form underneath, ax squared plus bx plus c. So for this question, for these points, the A value is -1, so it should be -x squared. The B value, it tells you, is 3, so this would be plus 3x, and the C value is -4, so I just write -4 in place of the C. Alright, and I just have a second example to try to walk through this with you one more time. So to get out of this screen, you can hit clear, or I usually just like to hit second quit. But I'm going to give you a different set of 3 points to try this process again. So just want to show you a couple little tips here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start, and I know you guys can't see my hands. Let me see if I can move this up a little bit. So I'm going to start out and I'm going to hit the stat button, right? I don't know if you can see my finger. There it is, my stat button. Okay, now we want to edit. We have 3 different points. So you can type over the top, or what you can do, just use your arrow key. I'm going to arrow up so the L1 is highlighted. Hit the clear button. It's right underneath your arrow keys, and then hit enter, and that will remove everything in list 1. If I arrow over again to the top, list 2, I'm going to hit clear and then enter, and that should take out all the points that we had from our previous example. Now, I'm going to go through, I'm just going to type in my points here. My x coordinates, I have 2, enter, 3, enter, 4, enter. That goes in the first column. Your y values go in the second column, so we have 3, 13, enter in between each one, and then 29. Once you've got the points squared away, I'm just going back over here. After I list these, you're going to hit the Stat button, arrow 1 over to the Calculate menu, and you want the Quadratic Regression, and you just keep hitting Enter until it shows up on the screen for you. And I'm going to lay this over here. Values here, my a value is 3, so this would be 3x squared. B value is -5, so -5x, and then the c value is 1. Now, just a little useful thing if you have any problems with your lists. If you go into the Stat button, just hitting this real quick, if you have anything going on that's weird, you can reset this really easily from the Stat menu. Just come down to where it says Set Up Editor, hit Enter twice, and that should reset anything that you may have deleted on accident or just set it back to the default. So just one more time, if you have any issues with the lists, just hit the Stat button, come down to number 5, Set Up Editor, hit Enter twice, and you should be reset.